Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where it's our 9th-year anniversary! Yes, 9 years of subjecting myself to terrible comics, getting shot at by evildoers, and long sleepless nights editing videos that get demonetized because I dared put a single word in the description box. Still the best job in the world, though. The last 2 years, I talked about how, due to the way Marvel had been restructured, the sales and marketing team had dictated that Ben Reilly's takeover of the Spider-Man costume had been inexplicably delayed so that they could try to repeat the success of Age of Apocalypse. It produced 2 craptacular storylines involving robots, virtual reality, and trying to establish a bit more of a new status quo for Ben. And now you can forget that those 2 storylines happened at all, because the comics certainly do! That's right, the new supporting characters and potential love interests for Ben, whoop, out the window. Don't you just love it when you pay money for something that wastes your time? I mean, it's possible I'm just misremembering and people like Carrie Bradley do reappear. I mean, I made that mistake about Judas Traveler's little club of losers, but at the very least, when it comes to today's review, they're completely irrelevant. And hey, it does fit in with the fact that nobody wanted to do those storylines, so it makes sense that they discard them the first chance they got. Behind the scenes, it was decided to cancel one of Spidey's 4 books in the wake of the storyline making Ben Spider-Man. Unfortunately, instead of just letting it be 3 books for the character, which was still more than he needed, it was decided to create a new book with Dan Jurgens on writing and art. I don't get it. These books were telling multi-part stories across all of them anyway. Why not just make them all the same damn book? But whatever, the Clone Saga had been going on for 2 years at this point, and it was finally time to make Ben Reilly into Spider-Man. Was it worth the wait? Well, let's dig into the Sensational Spider-Man #0 and find out!
Welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Linkara's gonna teach you all a lesson you won't learn. Brodsky, you're not the smartest. Life out, you're not an artist. Anyone who's had a bad comic published, it could be your turn. Linkara, he's a man punch, wears a birdie hat. Linkara, he has a magic gun. Where'd he purchase that? Linkara, coins, robots, Amazon and trucks. Linkara, this comic sucks. Linkara. Fashion, turn to left. Fashion, turn to right. Fashion, we are the
Reading from a trade, so normally wouldn't look at the cover, but given the circumstances of this book and it showing off Ben Reilly's new costume, I figure we can get that out of the way. Unfortunately though, the cover is really kind of lame. It's just Spidey in the middle of a web pattern. It's boring. At least when they introduced the black costume in Secret Wars, they had stuff going on in the background. Or hell, when they first showed it in Amazing Spider-Man, they at least homaged the Amazing Fantasy #15 cover. Still, it does give us a decent look at what is known as the Sensational costume. And it's pretty damn good. For a modern redesign of Spidey's look, it features elements familiar to the 90s, random parts of the outfit in a different color, but they keep it recognizably Spider-Man by not changing the overall red, blue, and web motif. Hell, the most significant change is making the spider legs on his chest extend around his shoulders. And a design element they keep from the Scarlet Spider outfit is the metal cartridge around his wrist where he keeps his web shooters. And unlike most other new designs for characters in the 90s, it's just the web shooters and not pouches everywhere. The legend begins anew. Legends of the Hidden Temple begins again with the new team, the Scarlet Spiders. We open with Ben Reilly's scruffy face. When I was a kid, my Aunt May woke me up for school every day by saying, "Rise and shine, Peter. Today is the first day of the rest of your life." She then made me do the dishes, claiming that that was the only thing I would ever do with my life. Stan Lee presents Ultimate Commitment. Ultimate Commitment was my least favorite of the Ultimate Universe miniseries. Ben is visiting Uncle Ben and Aunt May's graves, lamenting how little time he managed to really spend with both. See, I'm living in one of the seediest hotels New York has to offer. Nothing is working out. I mean, nothing is working out at all, considering just in the last few days, I was living in Dr. Trainer's apartment and trying to date a hot redhead who inexplicably became a blonde woman. Nothing is stable anymore. And I'm thinking of becoming Spider-Man again. I mean, that decision has only ever resulted in good, right? After recapping his entire history and great power and responsibility, yada yada, he says that's why he feels like he has to be Spider-Man again. But what if I can't do it anymore? It's been so long! Just saying, wearing that hoodie has been infinitely more comfortable than that spandex. He spots a man stealing some money from a flower vendor and chases after him. He tries to web him up to let the vendor catch up to him, but he's out of web fluid. As such, he swings down and kicks him, knocking him over long enough to have the vendor arrive and get his money. You want me to call the police? Cap's too good for this creep. I call my brother Vito, and he break your knees. Nobody messes with the Mafia's flower supply. I'm gonna call my brothers Vito and Vinny, and they're gonna get you some flowers. For your grave! Hey man, it was just a joke, you know? No big deal. He then went on to make several YouTube prank videos. Thanks, mister. If you ever need flowers, you go to my brother Vito's shop on 47th, okay? Thanks, but I get my flowers from a very special shop.
Oh, hi, Johnny. I didn't know it was you.
Nearby, Mary Jane's Aunt Anna spots Ben and thinks it's Peter, noting his odd appearance with the long hair and stubble. The real Peter and Mary Jane are in Portland doing a miniseries called The Final Adventure, which was meant to be the conclusion to Peter's story. Obviously, that did not end up happening, but that's a story for another time. Point is, Ben manages to get away from her after telling a few lies, and he admits how much it sucks that he has to do that. Gonna be hard to keep things like this from happening as long as I look just like Peter. Man, who knew that being Peter Parker had so many horrible problems associated with it? He has to remind himself that he is Peter, that the one with Mary Jane is the clone and all that, recapping other parts of the Clone Saga. Mary Jane and Peter, my clone, took off to live happily ever after, which leaves me more confused than ever. Oh, Ben, when it comes to the Clone Saga, everybody's confused! Meanwhile, a guy goes to an abandoned theater. Closed, huh? I don't think so. I came all this way to see Paul Blart, and I'm gonna see Paul Blart, damn it! He pulls out a piece of advanced equipment to use on the lock. Do your stuff, Shirley. Read the lock's mechanism with your sensor, and form a plasma key that will fit the gaps, and open the door. Or, you know, you could use actual lock-picking equipment. Probably less exposition involved. As he enters, the area seems to transform into an odd lattice of bizarre shapes and dried goop. My specialty is the acquisition of special, hard-to-get items, not weirdness like this. Maybe I'll charge Mr. Mysterious double.
I talk to myself a lot. Long monologues, complete with sarcasm.
The great and powerful Oz suddenly shows up in front of him, saying he'll only pay the agreed-upon price. We learn this guy's name is Armada, a mercenary. Zordon here tells Armada he wants him to obtain something called the DIT chip at the Neural Port Complex. Neural Port Complex? That's right next to Centennial University, right? Security there is tighter than Fort Knox. Drunken frat boys from the university have only managed to sneak in 3 times. Still, he takes on the job since he's supposed to be the best, and we cut back over to Ben, who's continuing to lament his bad luck. Particularly his lack of web fluid. Too bad I don't have access to Sayward Trainer's lab anymore so I could deal with this. I don't dare sneak into the labs at ESU for fear of running into someone who would recognize me as Peter. Damn, if only his laboratory was inside of that apartment I used to be staying at and I could avoid college campuses completely. He figures he can cobble together some homemade webbing from some common household items, but even when that's less than 20 bucks, it leaves him with less than 5 for food. The hotel manager where he's staying says he needs to come up with a week's deposit by noon tomorrow, or he's out of there. Although apparently the place is a dump anyway. Why doesn't the guy in the blue suit and red cape have these problems? Superman! The man of stable employment! He's finally able to assemble some crude web fluid. It really works! Making webbing with this stuff is equivalent to building a nuclear warhead out of sticks and matches. About the same level of radiation, at least. Good solid line that retains consistency, and even holds form when I expand the spray. Maybe I should sell the patent to Captain America so he doesn't have to drag that heavy shield all over town. It's a good thing that after all my complaining about a lack of money and resources to make web fluid, I'm wasting it all on parlor tricks. Yeah, I know, he needs to test it before he actually uses it in the field, but come on, stick to simple stuff until you're sure you have more resources, man. In any event, he decides to try to scrounge up some food at, coincidentally enough, the Centennial University area. He soon finds a coffee shop called the Daily Grind. This looks good. College students always know the best and cheapest places to eat, after all. Nothing like a place called the Daily Grind to remind those students of the excruciating time they have on a regular basis just being a college student, especially the lack of money. He orders coffee and a pasta special, but the total comes out to just 25 cents over the amount of money he has. I would say then ditch the coffee, but the woman who runs the place says he looks down on his luck and will let him get away with the lack of a quarter. He once again worries about how he's supposed to become Spidey again if he's so poor and crappy looking that people assume he's homeless. But then his thoughts are interrupted by some blonde woman in a sparkly outfit entering the Daily Grind with someone announcing her. Presenting live and in person, hot off the Centennial University Fashion Department runway, the one and only Desiree Winthrop at your service. Feel free to put your eyes back in your head, people. Centennial University, come to our college, and you too can be a raging douchebag with a cheerleading squad behind you. Overhearing her, Ben gets an idea. Fashion department? That's it!
Arson!
Desiree notices him and says he's sitting at her usual table, asking him to move to another one. She's passive-aggressive about it, but fortunately Ben's not gonna start something over Prissy McSparklepants since he was done with his food anyway and walks off. Instead, he's off to the university fashion department for his new costume. Okay, I'm thinking glitter, huge shoulder pads, and something that shows off my cleavage. At the nearby Neural Port Complex, aka the reason why marketing departments exist, Armada uses his tech to disable some of the security sensors of the place. Meanwhile, Ben breaks into the university's fashion department and finds the scrap fabric bin. And thus we see him consider a whole bunch of Spider-Man costumes that, well, some look okay, some look like garbage. The one up top kind of looks like an alternate Blue Beetle costume. There's a jokey one with him wearing something like an average X-Men outfit. There's one where his hair is exposed that makes me think of it more as an idea for a Spider-Boy, if anything, and no, I don't mean the amalgam one. Supposedly, this black costume on the right is a design Dan Jurgens suggested for the Sensational outfit, but they ultimately went with the one made by Mark Bagley we saw on the cover. It's not a bad design, but really seems more like an alternate symbiote black costume than something permanent. We alternate between Ben and Armada, with Ben creating his new suit, while Armada makes his way deeper into the lab. Wow! Sewing this costume, refilling my web shooters, all I can think of is the first day I ever did this back in high school. And it's all thanks to being a science major. We see him put in some hair dye and cut his hair, but only in silhouette. And now we see what the DIT chip is. It's an acronym for Digital Imagery Transmission Chip, a device that is capable of transmitting your thoughts and projecting them as a hologram. It's a hell of a device with a lot of potential, and while certainly a work of extreme science fiction, it's still a hell of a lot more believable than Dr. Octopus merging virtual reality with the real world. What I love is how the device is scanning this guy's mind for a projection, and the best he can come up with is a medal with the number 1 on it. I think somebody's a little resentful of how the Math Olympics went. Even now, we are only afforded a small glimpse of the chip's ultimate potential, Mr. Hanks. Once this chip is properly applied, this may well revolutionize the entire entertainment industry. Just think of what new genres of porn will emerge from the horrifying depths of the human mind. For some reason, the chip needs to be inside of a weightless environment, which it does so in this sphere. Unfortunately, Armada has arrived to steal the... oh boy. Hey, Armada, hardcore station called. They said you can keep the suit. It's not the worst design in the world for some armored high-tech guy, but any semblance of dignity is removed by the goofy-ass helmet with the huge wings along the side.
There. Sure glad I don't look stupid in this.
So as the dialogue has been alluding to, he's named his little robot helpers stuff like Penelope, Stephanie, etc. And one of them picks up the weightless sphere. Penelope is quite capable of levitating your sphere. Do you even lift, brah? My robot does. And so Ben leaves the motel, and we get a good big shot of the sensational Spider-Man costume, complete with him doing the splits so we can get a good look at his entire crotch. Down below, a woman named Jessica notices him and runs off to get her camera. Uh-oh, spider sense is tingling. That girl taking my picture? That couldn't be the problem. Unless... oh crap, I used a plaid fabric on my butt! Realizing that his spider sense is probably detecting something in the nearby neural port complex, he heads inside. Armada is about to kill the two scientists to ensure the device can never be recreated, but Spidey takes out one of the robot drones. Okay, let's get the preliminaries out of the way. You say, it's Spider-Man! And I say something like, that's an insult. It's amazing, spectacular, sensational Spider-Man to you. And then you say, does that mean you're also Web of and Peter Parker the Spectacular too? And then I just panic and shoot web at your eyes. Armada unleashes his robots on him, but Ben is able to destroy one. Armada says that one was named Diane, and he's pissed. You killed her! You killed her! We were gonna be married in 3 days, you monster! He takes both a scientist and the device and flies off, Spidey in hot pursuit. He manages to save both, but in the ensuing struggle, he drains his web shooters to make sure all of them can land safely on the ground, a webbed-up Armada included. Sheesh, I'm sick of these computer chip capers. Doesn't anybody heist jewelry anymore? Wait, so they do remember the previous storylines with the computer chip thefts? Why the hell don't they remember the supporting characters and apartment stuff?
This is starting to sound like a bad comic book plot.
Two of Armada's drones manage to grab the sphere and get away with it. It seems the drones either have minds of their own or else someone else is controlling them, since Armada is unconscious while that happens. The scientist, fortunately, is not a douche and is quite thankful of Spidey, as he promises to keep his eye out for the sphere. He even offers Spidey $100 for saving his life, but Ben refuses, saying he only wants a quarter so he can pay off that woman from the coffee shop. While he swings away, the robots return to the big giant head, now a dude standing on a rooftop. We shall meet again soon enough, Spider-Man, and when we do, you'll rue the day that you ever crossed the path of Mysterio! Good Lord, Mysterio, have you been hanging out with Judas Traveler? Why the hell are you wearing all those straps and belts? Otherwise, it's not a bad redesign for the dude. Apparently making more modern redesigns of classic villains was a priority for the creators at the time. The next day, Ben returns to the coffee shop to repay his debt, showing off his new look. Shorter blonde hair. Let's just say that your charity made me realize that, though I was broke, I didn't have to look it. Blonde people always have money! She had mentioned before that she had had some employees steal from her cash register recently that she had to fire, but Ben returning the money showed her he was a trustworthy person. So she offers him a job, which of course he accepts, asking only for a small cash advance to pay for some flowers to deliver to Ben and May's graves. Probably should have gotten some money for your hotel, dude. Yesterday, I was broke and wondering if I should ever be Spider-Man again. Now I work minimum wage until our store is closed by a competing Starbucks. I'm living the dream! And so our comic ends with Ben walking away and thanking the two for what they taught him, acknowledging that indeed, Spider-Man swings again. We can tell because his giant doppelganger is about to come down and punch Ben. This comic is fairly decent, which is definitely a rarity at this point in the Clone Saga. The story is fairly basic, but it needs to be to start up the new status quo and establish Ben as Spider-Man. We need to see him be heroic, be quippy, basically do all the things Spidey is supposed to be if we're to accept him as the real deal. If I have any complaints about the writing, it's that it could get a bit repetitive. Peter bookends it with the power and responsibility spiel, makes multiple references to how this feels like it did when he was first starting out, lots and lots of references to his bad luck, that kind of thing. The longer length of the book is good. It allows us room to breathe, but it's just some things only needed to be said once. The artwork is... I like Dan Jurgens and his art, but this was the 90s and it wasn't doing anyone any favors. Speaking of Dan, he's probably the reason why the book feels like such a breath of fresh air after the debacles we saw in the last 2 years. Dan was apparently very enthusiastic to work on Spider-Man, but then he learned about how Ben was taking over for Peter and they had no intention of restoring him and he was disheartened. And it may even be because of Dan that Ben did not end up becoming the one true Spider-Man, but that's a story for another day. As for this one, it's a not terrible way to start off Ben's tenure. By the way, people have asked me a few times if we're getting close to the end of the Clone Saga. And boy, does that ever tell me how much they don't know anything about the Clone Saga. This right here, this is the Clone Saga in its entirety. We've actually skipped around quite a bit, and eventually we're gonna go back to earlier stories. Not to mention, there's the original Clone Saga from the 70s, the real Clone Saga miniseries, Kane's Scarlet Spider series, the Clone Conspiracy stuff leading to Ben Reilly's resurrection, not to mention the Ultimate Clone Saga. Basically, I'm never gonna be done with the Clone Saga. Damn it!
Whoa! I don't think I even want to hear your story.